Welcome to the 14th Annual Central Southwest Asian Studies International Conference. Before we start, I would like to thank you all for coming, and I would like to thank our sponsors, Office of the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Central Southwest Asian Studies, my colleagues, Dr. Mehrdad Kia, Dr. Professor Samir Bitar, Montana World Affairs Council, Maureen and Mike Mansfield Center, Department of History, Department of Modern Classical Languages, Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, Russian Studies Program. Just a few words about, since we have people that, besides our classes, like community people, you all know that we started from scratch a couple of years after the fall of Soviet Union, 1991, and primarily it was just a single course that there were 3 of us, and we were trying to compromise on a time and a place. It happened to be on a Wednesday, late afternoon, evening, and we had no idea how many people were going to be showing up for that course. It was social science. I remember 344. I looked, and on the side it says capacity 65. So we were saying that, well, 20, 25 people show up. That's a good number. But then I noticed that a few minutes later, 2 or 3 people were bringing their own chairs, so it was packed, and then we started with 67, 68 people. And since then, like the one course somehow developed into an option, minor, major, now a center, and some people ask us, when are you going to start your graduate program? So thank for your support. We are talking about student support, people support, community support, and support from administration and our colleagues from this particular university. And so as far as format, you're going to be impressed by 3 fascinating presentations. We're going to have Ashley Jensen, and then this is the way that it goes, and then Chris Carson Blake, and then Chad Penn. The presentation primarily somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes, back to back, and we're gonna just continue the presentation till the end. Please jot down your questions when presentations are over. Then we open up for questions. Definitely we'll have time for a few questions, and then we take it from there. I'd like to ask Ashley and Chris and Carson and Chad to talk a little bit about themselves. We have a number of people that they are majoring or minoring in Central Asia. Some people double majoring, some people majoring and minoring in. One last but not least note, very important note, I'd like to thank Chad for his service in Iraq, and it's a great pleasure and honor to have you all and the panel. Please welcome Ashley Jensen. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Ashley Jensen, and I'm a student here at the University of Montana. And I am studying anthropology, archaeology, and Central Asian studies. And today, I'm going to be talking about the Stone Age. The archaeology of Central Asia has often been considered the dark side of the moon. It is the least known of all the ancient worlds of the archaeological record. Often when you think about the archaeology of Central Asia, you're going to think of the mummies of the Taklamakan, the kurgans of the Altai, artifacts from tribes like the Scythians, Saka, and Xiongnu. You often see Silk Road cities like Khotian, Bukhara, and Panjkent. But not very often you're going to find Stone Age sites. Often Stone Age sites look like this. You're going to have the hearth with outlying artifacts and lots of lithics. And lithics are any kind of rock that's going to be modified by humans. Sometimes you're going to find art artifacts in Stone Age sites, and these are made of ivory, and they're different art pieces that are the Venus figurines and bird figurines. Sometimes, when you're really lucky, you're going to find burials. And burials are going to offer DNA and associated artifacts with the burials, so it will help you learn through the lithics. Carbon-14 dating is a method that is determining the age of an object containing organic material by the properties of radiocarbon and radiotopic isotopes. And it was created by Willard Libby in the 40s and used in archaeology today. The key word with organic preservation in this, and to get organic preservation, you need good preservation environment. And so right here in the top, it's going to be hot and dry, which is going to lead to really good preservation, and salt. In the bottom is a picture of the Altai, and it's going to be cold and have permafrost and lead to a better preservation of organic materials. Caves also give us really great organic preservation. The caves are going to leave the things out of the weather and everything, so you're going to get more preservation. On lithics, you can do residue analysis. This is a new study that is really looking into the microscopic cracks of the lithics, and you can kind of tell sometimes when you're lucky you can get DNA and different things to tell what they were used on. And in the future, this could probably be used on more. Okay. So about 90,000 years ago, Homo sapiens leave Africa. And the Homo sapiens, there's other kinds of hominins earlier that are living in the areas like Neanderthals and the Denisovans. But 90,000 years ago, the atomically modern humans are going to be leaving Africa around that time. And the earliest proof of that is going to be in these caves in Israel. And they have the organic preservation of a skull. About 30 to 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens are leaving Europe. Or going into Europe, sorry. And the proof here is going to be a cave in Romania called Peștera de Cuos. And it also has organic preservation along with many lithic preservations that you can really associate. 30 to 63,000 years ago, Homo sapiens are in South Asia. And the proof of this is the Annamite Mountains in Laos. And the reason that this is such a long period is because there's not a lot of proof of dating, and it's really variable. 40 to 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens are in the far north and Arctic. And the proof we have for that is the SK Mammoth site. And on this site, there is proof of human butchery and killing. And it is on the bones there, if you can see. Up in here is going to be the areas that there is impact fractures on the bones. And it is showing proof of killing and butchery. And directly south of this area is in the Yenisei Bay. And directly south of that is going to be Lake Baikal. And Lake Baikal is an ecological hotspot. It's one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. And it even has its own species of seals, and migrating birds come through, and there's often lots of prey around here. So it's always been a really ecological hotspot. Many Stone Age sites are hard to prove the dates because it has a lack of datable evidence. And lithics can often be used as markers of time as well. Lithics have different styles that evolve. Like within here, there's just small variations within the styles, but there's no functional difference, so it's more of a cultural marker that you can look at. And here we have some lithics from India. And these date to 30 to 45,000 years ago. And as you can see, this is a blade core, and it's cylindrical, and has a long blade core thing, and it's very small, so it's going to be a microblade core. And I'll come back to where that fits in. And here we have some lithics from China that date to 13 to 22,000 years ago. And on here, you're going to see a small, almost leaf-shaped biface, which is going to be on both sides are worked, and it's going to be a smaller tool. And we also have a cylindrical blade cores right in here, and also right over in here. And they're going to be really similar to the ones that you find in India much earlier, so it's likely that the ideas are moving up at least. And this is the Aurignacian toolkit and art. And the Aurignacian is going to be the kind of one of the early European designs. And it's really known for its blades with chipped edges. So this is going to be a long blade with edges that are chipped right here. And it's also known for its art designs like the Venus figurines and some of the anthropomorphic figures. And around 30,000 years ago, there's going to be a split where the Aurignacian splits into two. And the Gravettian people, which are just another group of the Aurignacian, are going to be leaving and going into other parts of Central Asia. And here are some of the lithics that are comparing the site Dolní Věstonice in Czech Republic, and also a site called Malta in Lake Baikal. And it has, you can see the Venus figurines on both sides that are very similar, and a lot of the chipped flakes are going to be very similar. So they're really similar artifacts, and they're around the same time period. And there's also DNA evidence at this site that links these two, knowing that it is a for sure migration. And this is looking at the South Asia lithics compared to the also more from Malta in Lake Baikal. And as you can see, it has the cylindrical blade cores on both sides that look very, very similar. And during all of this, you have to remember that the temperatures and the conditions, the climate conditions, are going to be very, very different. So around 25,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, it's going to be the glacial maximum. So there's going to be ice and glaciers coming all the way down in full glaciation periods. And around the turn of the Holocene and Pleistocene, there's going to be a huge shift where all the temperatures are going to be getting warmer. And 12 to 14,000 years ago, you're going to have this site called Duktai Cave in northern Siberia that has direct links to Dry Creek, which is in Alaska. And so this is another proof of a migration that has, once again, the leaf-shaped bifaces on both sides and almost completely identical lithic structures. And around this time is when the Holocene extinction happens. And this is about 10,000 years ago. All of the megafauna animals are going to be dying out, and the environment is completely changing. And so everything goes differently from 10,000 years on. And overall, Central Asia's archaeology is the least known of the ancient world, and even less is known about the Stone Age. New research about the Stone Age can teach us about ancient people's daily lives, cultures, migrations, looking through the Stone Age sites, especially through lithics. And that is it. Thank you.
So hello, good afternoon. My name is Chris Carson Blake. I am an undergrad student here at the university. I finished up my 2 degrees in history and the Central Southwest Asian Department last spring semester. This is the 3rd conference I've given a talk to. I am good friends with both of the both the Kia brothers, Artie and Mirdad, and a good friend of Samir, but I don't see him here. So I told them I'd come back and give a talk, and as you can see from my slide, I'm going to give a talk about the history of gunpowder. So let's jump to it. So it started in the Han Dynasty, 150 BC up to 300 BC. Emperor Wu Di ordered his alchemists to find the alchemic properties of immortality. Immortality has always been a big thing in human history. So many emperors, especially in the past, have always strived for it. The ironic thing about it all is the alchemist Wu Beiyang recorded his findings of experimenting mixing potassium nitrate and sulfur. This wasn't the start of gunpowder, but this would be something that would create heat. And from here, he did many other tests trying to find the key for immortality, but discovering he is finding substance to create heat that can last for a while and all that. Jumping a few hundred years in the future to the 8th and 9th century, the Tang Dynasty, this is where gunpowder actually was fully discovered. By mixing charcoal into the mix of potassium nitrate and sulfur, gunpowder came. You can use sugar as a substitute, and with this, the alchemists of China created a very highly flammable and explosive powder. When they first discovered this, it was amazing to them. They had no idea what they made, and the exact opposite of immortality in a way, but they created something that through history would become immortal and change the age of warfare and history itself and the world. In the beginning, gunpowder was mostly used for medicine by the Chinese and disease to fight. Like a good example for arrow wounds, you would take a bit of gunpowder and put it on the end of the arrow and ignite it and pull the arrow through the body, and the ignition of the powder would actually cauterize the internal wound and destroy the chance of disease or infection. And other things to fight bugs, like they used it against a lot using smoke and smoke powder to fight mosquitoes and all that such thing. And of course, the classic Chinese fireworks. Fireworks came more as we all see them today, as fun and celebration. Originally, they were used to scare away enemies, and in Chinese culture, evil spirits. The Silk Road is what first started the expansion of gunpowder into the world. It was seen as a commodity, a very rare one, but a very pricey one. One thing that made it interesting on the Silk Road, it was very dangerous to travel with, is if it got too hot, it would ignite. If it was pressurized and dropped heavily or anything like that, it was ignite. So very few merchants actually traveled with it. But the Silk Road would eventually bring it to the Middle East and eventually west, but still wasn't that big. It wasn't used quite as a weapon yet. Then in the 10th century, actually through sort of an accident, China fully found the military power of gunpowder. A fireworks store in a town in China actually went up, killing a good part of the small village, and that's when they truly realized this is a weapon. And so China, at the beginning, started to modernize it, create weapons. As you can see, there's a couple here. What's the laser on this? Like here, right here is just simple cloth bombs. You could say the first grenades. They'd either take bombs or clay containers, load it in with a fuse, or use absent substance to ignite it, giving it a timer. Then up here you have pretty much the first gun. They would load it with anything from arrows to rocks, anything, ignite it, and just like a musket, would throw it in any direction in forward of you. They had themselves explosive arrows and other such weapons as fire lances, which was pretty much the first flamethrower. It was a lance with a cylinder on the end of it, which when you would stab forward, igniting it, it would blast about a 15-foot jet of flame. After China discovered the power of gunpowder as a weapon, they tried to keep it to themselves. They did not want to expand it at all to the rest of the world, seeing how powerful it is, and if any other power could gain this, it would change. Due to the Silk Road, the Islamic Empire had gunpowder and discovered their chemical properties and replicated their own and changed it a little bit using different things. It has been found that the Muslims did use it during the Crusades against the Crusaders, never to the extent of weaponry of the Chinese of projectile weapons, but they used their makeshift bombs and burning substance and all that to fight the Crusaders. And that was the first big part of once the Western world saw gunpowder, and they were terrified by it. Then gunpowder truly expanded under the Mongols. With the rise of Genghis Khan in Mongolia and the spread of his empire into China, he took central and western China, and one thing the Mongols were known for is once they conquered, they would take any of the architects, technicians, all that, they would keep them alive and bring them into the fold in their army, especially in the military. And right here is when the Mongols really started to use gunpowder. And the term sappers, known as bomb technicians in war, all that, there was a couple things that hinted at it. I couldn't find any true evidence about it, but it is mentioned that not the term itself, but the idea of sappers sort of started under the Mongol Empire, where their whole job was you have explosives, you need to take down this enemy wall. Usually a job of a sapper was you didn't come back from it, you ran to the wall, set the charge. That was it. But it was to start with this that Mongols really started to show what gunpowder would become in warfare. Following the Mongols, the next big step of the evolution of gunpowder as a weapon in the world was the Ottoman Empire. Now, they truly started to modernize it. And one way they were able to do this was due to the Millet system. A Millet system was a system they had in the Ottoman Empire, religious caste system in a way you could say, where there was Christian society, Muslim society, Greek Orthodox, so on and so forth. And one big society that put a lot to weapon design was the Jewish society in the Millet system, the Ottoman Empire. Through their technicians and all that, the first ever smooth-bore cannon was made, and how, like, everyone knows of the fall of Constantinople, later Istanbul. How that was taken was actually these smooth-bore cannons, and for days they shelled the outside walls of Constantinople, and then shortly after that was pretty much a walk through taking the city. And after that, the Ottomans took so many cities just for the fact of shelling with their cannons because people were too afraid to fight after seeing the destructive power of gunpowder. Another thing the Ottomans started to put into warfare was rifles. The Janissaries, one of their elite military units, was the first true unit to actually use rifles as a main weapon of warfare, as you can see here. And then gunpowder with the West, it started to emerge in the West and Europe in the 13th century. A lot of it was taken from stuff like the Ottoman Empire, seen from the East and the Middle East, techniques and weapons like that. It really boomed in the 15th and 16th century, and we know eventually in history, following the 16th century, Europe became the true power of gunpowder weapons and the type. And from there, with the expansion of colonialism, especially in the United States, the next big leap came where in the 1800s, instead of muskets and cannons and just cap and ball powder, cartridges were made. What we have today is bullets. Then eventually primers were made, and the rest, in a way, is pretty much history. And this is sort of a slide I've done just showing what it all started as. As you can see, this is the beginning, just the stick with a rocket on it. You light it, you launch it towards your enemy. The next step became just a simple cannon. You load powder into the back of it, put a paper cloth charge over the powder, put whatever your projectile you so choose in the cannon, ignite and fire. Then it came to muskets, flintlocks, so on and so forth, still just putting powder in the gun, putting a cloth, dropping the ball in, packing it down, igniting it. And then with center fire rifles and cartridges, here's just an example of a lever action. That's 1800s started to come. And then the big thing that showed how much we jumped forward in the creation of use of gunpowder and weaponry was World War I. This here is the biggest weapon created in World War I. It was German-made. It was nicknamed Big Bertha. One of its shells is as tall as me. It took 5 men to load the weapon and much more to actually operate it. And it would create a crater 200 meters across. Like, it was a very devastating weapon. And for the fact that we started as this and just cloth bombs and came to this shows how much we've changed. And then with the Second War came fully automatic weapons. This is an STG-44, German-made again. It was the first gun to coin the term assault rifle or assault weapon. And then just sort of last to show where we are today, I put down on the bottom of the screen a tank. And we've come to the point where we're putting these strong artillery pieces of the source of gunpowder on top of mobile units. And in conclusion, to me, it's sort of a joke that a man set on his greed and fear of death wanted immortality, and through his want came gunpowder. And it's sort of ironic, really, that the thing, we came to it trying to find immortality, and we made one of the most destructive substances in the world. The thing is, without the discovery of gunpowder, the world as we know it would never be. We've expanded truly because of it. We've become powers throughout the world, throughout history, because of this fine, simple powder, all for the point of immortality. And in the end, war never changes, only the weapons do. Thank you. Have a good one.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you everyone for spending time with us this afternoon. My name is Chad Penn, and I'd also like to thank Dr. Kia for allowing us to present here. What I'm going to be talking about today are the Khanates of Khiva, Kokand, and Bukhara in the 1860s and 70s. The reason this is important is because this is the time of the Russian conquest and the Russian consolidation of power in Central Asia, which would help lay the foundations for Soviet policies in the 20th century. This painting is a painting done by a Russian artist who accompanied the army. So you'll notice that these are the Russians, and the cavalry are Central Asians. Okay, so to orient us with where we are in the world, you'll notice the Aral Sea right here. This is the Khanate of Khiva, Khanate of Bukhara, and the Khanate of Kokand. This is the Amu Darya River, which flows through both Khiva and Bukhara. Syr Darya right here. These are, the land between there is known as classically as Transoxiana. More contemporary map that shows the former Soviet republics, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. Where we are in the 18s and 60s and 70s is primarily Uzbekistan, which stretches from the southern tip of the Aral Sea there all the way into the Fergana Valley, which includes parts of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Okay, so the political composition of Bukhara and Khiva. During this time, it's an Uzbek Muslim dynasty, meaning a hereditary monarchy, and the population is chiefly Sunni Muslims. Uzbeks, who made up the majority, are Turkic-speaking. Their ethnic origin is Turkic, Mongol, and Iranian. In Bukhara, the Uzbek majority was about 60%. Tajiks represented the largest minority at about 30%, and Turkmens 10%. In Khiva, the Uzbek majority was around 65%, Turkmens around 30%, and the remainder were Karakalpak and Kazakhs. One of the main parts of the power structure during this time are the religious institutions. So apart from having a centralized monarchy, he would often appoint the muftis, who were educated in religious law. They acted as sort of a lawyer, if you will. Then there's also the ulema, who were religious scholars, and they were the professors and teachers at the madrasas, which were the colleges or seminaries. And this group exercised great political influence, and their interests were in preserving traditional conservative Islamic tradition. Okay, so relations between the Khanates. There's rivalries among all of them. Bukhara and Kokand fought over Samarkand, Tashkent, and Tashkent. Bukhara and Khiva disputed over Merv, or Mary now. Rivalries among the Khanates and their lack of modern military implements proved to be favorable conditions for the Russian conquest. But before we get to that, we'll talk about the Russian relations before 1865, which is the beginning of the hostilities. In 1860, raw cotton made up 31% of the Khanates' exports to Russia. So that's Kokand, Khiva, and Bukhara, but primarily Bukhara and Khiva for climactic reasons. Also in 1860, manufactured cotton goods from Russia to the Khanates was 53% of Russian exports to the continents. Now, the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, it increased the world price of cotton for everybody, including Great Britain, who would get their cotton from India, and Russia began to lean heavily on Central Asian cotton. In 1864, 85% of the continent's exports were raw cotton, whereas in 1860 it was 31%. And also the value of Central Asian raw cotton exports increased from just about 700,000 rubles in 1860 to 6.5 million rubles in 1864. Okay, so the conquest of Kokand. In 1865, Colonel Chernayev besieges Tashkent, which would become the administrative center of Turkestan, which would be, it's a Russian territorial organization. In 1866, Kodshent and most of northern Kokand, as well as Tashkent, were annexed into the Russian Empire. Western Kokand was given to Bukhara, and that included Samarkand, which is one of the most significant cities in Central Asia, historically speaking and culturally speaking. In 1876, Kokand was annexed by the Russian Empire as a result of civil unrest and the local authorities' inability to maintain their control. Okay, the conquest of Bukhara. Hostilities escalated between 1865 and 1867. These hostilities resulted in an uneasy peace. The hostilities resumed after Emir Muzaffar, who was the dynastic ruler of Bukhara, was defeated at Karakurgan. He offers an unconditional surrender to Kaufman, who was the governor general of Turkestan. Kaufman rejects his surrender and maintains him on the throne because he sees him as a useful subordinate. This results in the Treaty of 1868. Major points of the Treaty of 1868 are that it ceded the Zarafshan Valley and Samarkand to Russia, so they became annexed into the Russian Empire. Protections for Russian merchants in Bukhara, which included a fair tax rate, the same tax rate as the locals would have, as well as not being arrested. And Emir Muzaffar maintained his legal control, even if he was in reality a subordinate. The conquest of Khiva. 1869, Russian troops crossed the Caspian Sea from the Caucasus, and they established Krasnivas, which is a military commercial outpost. This made Khan Rahim II of Khiva very nervous, so he sends an envoy to Bukhara to request help against the Russians. Muzaffar arrests the envoy and presents it to Kaufman and says it's kind of one little small example of a changing political dynamic, and it's also showing subordination to Russia. In 1872, Khan Rahim sends an envoy to Calcutta, which was London's, it's England's, they're kind of their capital in India. And they're told there that he's asking for help, and they tell him that Great Britain recognizes the Khanates in that area as lying within the sphere of influence, and he recommends to the Khan Rahim that he takes a friendly posture towards Tashkent and St. Petersburg. In 1873, it culminated in 12,000 Russian troops capturing Khiva and resulted in the Treaty of 1873. Now, the Treaty of 1873 was imposed much more harshly upon Khiva than it had been for the Treaty of 1868 for Bukhara. The Khan of Khiva, this is in the language of the conventions, is an obedient servant to the Tsar and the Russian people. All foreign policy decisions would require approval from Tashkent, which was Russia's capital in Central Asia. Russians were permitted to acquire land in Khiva, and unrestricted navigation rights of the Amu Darya for Russian vessels. So if you remember from the map, that's that southern river that flows into the Aral Sea. All right, so this is some just picture of these folks. Left to right, Governor General Kaufman, who was Governor General of Turkestan from 1867 to 1882 when he died. Next to him is Emir Muzaffar, who maintained his throne until 1885. And Khan Rahim II of Khiva, who was on his throne until 1910. Okay, so results of the conquest. Tsar Alexander II, and if you remember from other courses that you may have taken or things you may have watched or read, freed the serfs in 1861. He was assassinated in 1881. He was unwilling to annex Bukhara and Khiva wholesale, with the exception of Samarkand and the Zarafshan Valley and the places they had already taken. One, because they were considered to be an economic liability. They really just wanted them to produce cotton for them. Also, disputes with Great Britain over the northwestern border and the status of Afghanistan. This matter isn't decided until the 1890s, and it almost starts two wars between Russia and Great Britain. And so the ruling dynasties are left in place as subordinate states until the Soviet era, and it laid the foundation for Soviet policies in the 20th century, which includes the expansion of cotton, irrigation projects that would cause detrimental ecological damage to the Aral Sea region, which is this region we're talking about, and also the creation of new nations by Stalin from 24 to 36, 1924 to 1936, which you saw on the more modern map, the 5 Soviet republics. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. Thank you very much.
Three excellent presentations. We are open for questions. Please, you can address to one of the speakers, or if you have a macro general type of question, please bring it up, and I would like to ask everyone, like all the panel members, to respond to the questions. Thanks. There are microphones there. Please use the microphone.
Oh.
So my question is about the economy of the region there. It seems that we've got a case where 3 major local powers, Russia from the north, China from the east, and India from the south, are trying to achieve dominion over that region for control of natural cotton production and other things. Does that
That's part of it. It's also, a lot of it has to do with Great Britain's interests in India. Oh, excuse me. Great Britain did not want Russia to threaten their possessions in India. But yes, there's definitely if what you're getting at is like a center-periphery relationship, it's certainly true. That area was reduced to a peripheral state. I hope I answered your question.
Well, I was kind of referring actually more in today's time, because we have the same conflict region in the same conflicts fomenting in the same region here. I'm wondering if there's many of the same driving forces behind those conflicts.
It's just my opinion that all conflicts come from the same reasons, but
Okay.
yeah, so I would agree.
So cotton supply would be one of the main reasons why we potentially have conflict in that region today.
No. I wouldn't say that.
All right.
I'm sorry, I'm hard of hearing. I'm sorry.
Oh. Okay, I have a question for Mr. Blake. You were talking about the modernization of the gunpowder. You talked about the cartridge a little bit and its role. Would you say that the cartridge is in fact the most important, as far as the modern world, the most important advancement in gunpowder? Because I know with the cartridge you basically make repetition a factor and a possibility. Would you say that's the most important?
Yes, I would completely agree with that. Because with the cartridge, it allowed us to have we could reload. Like the best thing with cap and ball that we had with more than one shot was a revolver or a revolver carbine, where you had up to 6. You had to cylinder up to 6 rounds of cap and ball. But after you shot that revolver, you still had to take time to reload every single 6 shot. But with a cartridge, like you look at the 1800s with the rise of 6-shooters and lever actions, you're giving guns magazines. And with having cartridges, your bullet is already there. You don't have to press it in the gun. You don't have to do it yourself. You just put it in and fire. And if you jump forward more to World War I and World War II, when fully automatic weapons became a thing, like cartridges is the whole reason you were able to have a 30-round magazine for, like the gun I showed, the STG-44.
Beating arms and
So yes, I would completely agree with that. Cartridges completely changed the world. completely modernize what weapons were. And because because the cartridges started coming out mid-1800s, not a big thing. It was one of those special things because it was money-wise. They were used in the Civil War, more on the North than the South because of production and cost. Towards the end of the war, that's when it really boomed. And like you look at all the Old West movies, that's what you always see.
Right.
Towards the end of the 1800s, it was very modernized in Europe with the Maxim machine gun, the rise of all that. So yes, I would say cartridges was the big turning point to making what guns are today.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to address my question to Mr. Penn. Regarding the earlier British aggression in the region that eventually came under Russian control, I'm aware that they attempted to invade Afghanistan in 1842, not the correct millennium, but in 1842. I was curious if there were further British incursions into that region prior to the eventual Russian conquest of the Khanates.
Okay. There were definitely a British presence there, and there were actually British agents there who were tortured and killed. I don't remember exactly. I think it's in the 40s or the 50s, 1800s. I don't really know enough to answer your actual question about the British incursions into Bukhara and Khiva. I know in the period that I'm talking about, I mean, they definitely recognize it as a Russian influence. And they're primarily concerned about establishing their border with Afghanistan, and also what the function of Afghanistan would be, whether it would be under the influence of Great Britain or Russia, or neutral. And they don't seem to agree on that for a long time. So I'm sorry I can't actually answer your question, but thank you.
All right.
Yeah, there are British agents actually from Gilgit into Kashgar area to the east part, that thousands of them are staying within the Xinjiang area to the east of Central Asia. The Russian forces penetrate into Afghanistan, but according to St. Petersburg oath, promise, or agreement, actually, they create 1893, Afghanistan was created, and then they, a few years later, they signed this treaty. They use Afghanistan as a buffer zone. British, the dearest colony they have is India, to somehow to secure India, but at the same time, when there is civil war going, it's called Civil War of 1917, Bolshevik Revolution, 1924. Although they say 1924, but civil war as Basmachi movement continues into 1930s, and thousands of people died. When they asked British for help, they said, no, we have this agreement, the St. Petersburg agreement with Russia, we don't want to bother anymore. So a lot of people were slaughtered in between, yeah. Any other question, comments? Well, I would like to thank you all, and thank you so much, panel.